Mom, I quit. I should have quit a long time ago, but I felt sorry for you. Don't worry, I won't need a reference, I already have a job. That's how I ended my 9-year run at my parents' restaurant. I'd been working there since 6th grade. I started on dishes, and by the time I left, I was basically running the place. I made the menus, handled staffing, ordered supplies, ran staff meetings, basically everything except own the place. I loved the work. Everything was great, until it wasn't. My sister, Alexis, is 2 years older than me, and in my parents' eyes she could do no wrong. The funny thing is she'd never shown the slightest interest in the restaurant. She wasn't even required to work there growing up. Then, out of nowhere, after graduating from university, she decided she wanted to come home and run the family business. When my parents announced that Alexis was going to be running the business, I immediately voiced my concerns. If Alexis was going to be running the restaurant, what exactly was I supposed to be doing? My parents assured me her arrival would lighten my workload. They said all the things she'd learned at university would help make the restaurant bigger and better. Instead, everything started going downhill. The first thing Alexis wanted to change was the menu. She said we needed exciting new dishes to attract new customers. What she didn't understand was that the menu had been carefully built over years. It wasn't flashy, but it kept our regulars happy, and those regulars were the reason we stayed profitable. The complaints started almost immediately. We were a small mom-and-pop restaurant. People didn't come to us looking for trendy dishes they couldn't pronounce. Sure, the new menu brought in new customers, but most of them were Alexis's friends, and half the time she wasn't even charging them. When longtime customers complained, Alexis told them she was sure there were other restaurants in town that would better suit their needs. And just like that, many of our regulars stopped coming. Then there was the staff. They hated her. She came in trying to rule with an iron fist. Every shift change, every time off request, every little decision suddenly had to go through her. The problem was that our staff wasn't just staff, they were family. For example, everyone knew our head cook arrived late every Tuesday and Thursday because he had a standing appointment with his kid that he couldn't miss. It had never been a problem. Alexis turned it into one. She made such a big deal about it that my parents actually had to offer him more money just to keep him from quitting. Meanwhile, my workload wasn't getting smaller. It was getting bigger. Not only was I still doing everything I'd always done, but now I was spending hours fixing Alexis's mistakes. I was working more hours than ever before, and most of those hours were unpaid. Then came the day that pushed me over the edge. My mom asked me to review the books. Then I saw Alexis's salary. She had a salary and they were still paying me hourly. When I did the calculation, she was making over $30,000 more per year than I was. The woman with zero restaurant experience. The woman whose decisions were driving customers away. I stared at that number for a full minute before getting up and walking into my parents' office. I asked if I could have a word with them, walked in, and closed the door. Then I laid everything out. I talked about the customers we'd lost, the staff problems, the extra hours I was working fixing Alexis's mistakes. I told them how close we were to having employees quit. Then I brought up the pay. I asked how they could justify paying Alexis $30,000 more than me when I'd been helping run the restaurant for nearly a decade and she'd been there less than a year. My parents sat there silently while I spoke. When I finished, my mother unloaded on me. She said the fact that I was questioning Alexis's leadership proved how little I understood about business. She said every new leader faces resistance and that short-term losses were normal. Then she really twisted the knife. She told me my lack of education and vision was the reason the restaurant had stayed small all those years. I reminded her that I'd taken classes in bookkeeping, restaurant management, and hospitality at the community college. More importantly, I'd spent years actually doing the job. She didn't care. You kept us in the black, she said. Alexis is taking us into the future. Then I asked again about the salary. My mother said she didn't need to justify it. According to her, Alexis's salary was competitive for someone with her education and expertise. In fact, she claimed they had originally offered her even more money. The worst part? Alexis had apparently turned it down and told them they could renegotiate after all her plans worked out. The entire time, my father sat there in silence. After another 5 minutes of going in circles, I gave up and left. I knew I was never going to get my mother to see my side. That night, I started making calls. Other restaurant owners, suppliers, old contacts. What my parents didn't know was that I'd turned down dozens of job offers over the years because I felt leaving would be disloyal. For the first time, loyalty didn't matter anymore. I wasn't planning my future at my parents' restaurant. I was planning my exit. Turns out finding a new job was the easy part. All the restaurant owners in town knew who was really running my parents' restaurant, and by the end of the week I had multiple job offers. I was still going to work every day, but I started pulling back. When employees came to me with problems, I sent them to Alexis. When customers had complaints, I sent them to Alexis. After all, she was the one running the restaurant. I think everyone felt the shift because the following week my parents pulled me into the office. My mother told me she'd noticed that Alexis was suddenly handling things I used to take care of and that I wasn't staying late anymore to make sure everything ran smoothly. I smiled and said, "Well, Alexis is in charge, so I don't really see the need to do her job too." My mother smiled right back. "That's right, Alexis is in charge," she said. "But you still need to run things." I told her I was handling all the responsibilities I was being paid for. If she wanted more, we'd need to talk about compensation. You would have thought I'd slapped her. When she finally recovered, she told me that if I didn't want to do the job as she dictated, I could collect my things and leave. I gave her my most sincere smile. "Mom, I quit. I should have quit a long time ago, but I felt sorry for you. Don't worry, I won't need a reference, I already have a job." Then I walked out, cleaned out my office, and went home. 2 months later, I was running a restaurant downtown. My salary had more than doubled. The owners respected me. The staff respected me. Meanwhile, my mom wouldn't stop calling. First she said she knew I'd come crawling back. Then she started bargaining. Would I come back for 2 weeks and train Alexis? Maybe just 1 week? Could I at least write down everything I did? Could I send over my supplier contacts? Then came the offers. More money. A management position. Even partial ownership. I ignored every single call. Even the calls from Alexis. The only call I answered was from my father. He apologized. He said he understood why I left. He said he'd rather lose the restaurant than lose me. For the first time in years, I felt like he was actually listening. I told him we could rebuild our relationship. But I never wanted to talk about the restaurant again. And he agreed. A few months later, I heard the business was still struggling. For the first time in years, that wasn't my problem anymore. My parents made their choice. They chose Alexis. And for the first time in almost a decade, I chose myself.